Hi, I'm Dustin Mason from Performance Lexus in St. Catharines. And today we're gonna look at two family-oriented luxury midsize haulers, the RX 350L versus the new Lexus TX. You're gonna wanna make sure you stick around to the backseat and trunk comparison in particular. But before I get into it, make sure you hit like and subscribe for more Lexus-related content. Okay, getting into the design language of the front end, let's start with the RX 350L. Now, the RX 350L, when it first came out, I was very excited about because here was a three-row SUV from Lexus that I thought would be the answer to anybody looking at a minivan. And looking at the design language of the front, it is starting to feel a lot more outdated than it was back in 2018 when it came out. So let's look at it. This one is an entry-level premium package in Canada, and we have this sort of take on a spindle grille. It's not as aggressive as like the F Sport Series grille, but there is a lot of shapes and trapezoids and things like that to it, which give it a really good three-dimensional look at any angle. It does have the chrome that sort of goes around said grille. It has the frosted daytime running lights. It does have the headlight washers, even though this is the premium package, with a bi-LED single LED bulb, I guess you could say, for the headlight. And then the bottom sort of has a little bit of frosted or mainly just like painted gray lip kit to it, and the classic Lexus emblem in the center. In terms of the hood, we do have a couple different lines. A big one that sort of starts from this section and goes and sort of wraps around to the side profile, which is gorgeous. On the black, you don't notice it as much, but on the atomic silver color, for instance, you can really see that line. And then this sort of this little vision lines that sort of just kind of line up to the side of the Lexus emblem and just gently go outward. And actually, even when I look from the side, you can really see this bigger line, even just looking at it from the straight on. Over to the TX, where we see a much different profile, and you can see sort of how the design language has changed over the last few years. We have a front end that's very straight up and down, where on the RX 350L, it was a lot more pointed. This one is very straight up and down, and to me, it makes it look like it has more presence when it's on the road. And we have the new Lexus emblem, which is called the Lexus Emblem 2.5. And the reason it's so different is even when you get up close to it, you'll notice it's a little bit skinnier, a little bit thinner because of aerodynamics. And what Lexus wanted to do wasn't just about fuel economy. Aerodynamics also is about how much turbulence and wind noise and things like that you hear. So that was well thought out. That's a TX joke, because the T stands for thoughtful. Anyway, looking at the rest of the design language, you'll see a grille that's a lot more hidden. It's a frameless spindle grille, and there's a lot less shapes and things like that. In fact, it's almost two-dimensional instead of three-dimensional, and there is some nice detail still along the sides, and a little bit of that spindle venting in the center. A lot of that is twofold. One, for better aerodynamics and less sort of airflow going in there. And two, it's supposed to be design language that's gonna last down the road when a lot more EVs and hybrids and things like that are on the road and don't have those big grills anymore. So it's kind of a transition period that I'm noticing. The rest of it, we have a little bit of fog lights and some sort of textured plastic off to the sides. On the bottom, we have a lip that has sort of like a diffusion to it, which I'm sure is for aerodynamics. We have the gorgeous daytime running light that are massive, again, to tie in that presence of the front of the TX, and a really nice headlight setup. This one is just a bi-LED. It's not the triple LED by any means. In terms of other body lines that we see up here, we have a little bit of a hood line that sort of starts in the center and curves to the side, but it's not nearly as big as the RX. The hood itself actually seems a lot more flat. So it sort of goes in line with the rest of that front grille where it's a lot more flat and not curvature, not super spindly, things like that. And then we have this little box right here that just has some sensors in it. So as we get to the side profile, you can see some really big differences in the RXL versus the TX. I'm not gonna talk about the wheels too much. This one is an entry-level one, so it has an 18-inch wheel, but the rest of the actual shape of it. So we do have things like the chrome that circles the entire side window glass, but even just paying attention to the height, I'm 6'1", and I can see very much over top of the RXL. It has sort of a sleek style and shape to it. We have some gorgeous body lines that sort of go on top of the door handles, and a little one that goes underneath. At the bottom, we have some textured plastic, but nothing too crazy. The doors themselves are super solid. It has the classic old sort of door handle design, which lights up kind of nicely at nighttime. And that's for both the front and the back. Don't forget, it's a 3-row SUV. And I always liked the shape of this sort of third glass. In fact, I remember when they came out with this, I was at the Lexus factory and they called it like a seamless glass or something like that. However, don't forget, this is a 3-row SUV and that is what the third row is looking out of. So it is kind of small back here. It doesn't taper off as much as a regular RX wheelbase. However, it does still sort of taper off at the very end of it, I would say. And it is bigger than the regular RX 350 just by like, I think 6 inches or something like that. Nothing major. Okay, over to the TX. So now you'll see a little bit more of the size that you can't see from just looking at the front. A big one is the height. So again, 6'1", you can see it's towering over me. And a lot of that is for that interior space. That's the main reason behind it. In terms of decoration and silhouette, we do have some chrome at the top and a little bit of black at the bottom. I did notice the bottom of the doors are not textured, they are painted. The wheels are a lot bigger than this previous generation RX. The door handles are the new E-latch design, and actually they feel a little bit heavier than the RXL. I think the rear one definitely feels heavier than the RXL. The rest of the silhouette, it doesn't taper down as it gets to the back, it sort of tapers up. So it actually seems to get taller as I walk towards it. And then that third row space or glass that it looks out is massive. Like when you look at the size of this glass, it's almost the size of a normal glass of the second row or first row in most SUVs and cars that are on the road today. Obviously it doesn't go up and down or anything like that, but just to let in that light, get rid of that claustrophobia in that third row, I would much rather have this than the RXL. Okay, so going to the back of the TX, we have these gorgeous taillights that sort of wrap from one side all the way to the other and underline the LE XUS emblem. I've been a big fan of that over the last couple of years. Again, it just creates some good presence when you're driving behind it. We have this little baby exposed wiper at the bottom of the windshield. It does work very well though. However, I do wish that it was underneath that little spoiler at the top. I think that'd be a really cool touch. Let's look at the trunk. Very quick, smooth opening, I would say. And then back here, we have enough room for 6 or 7? I think it's 7 pieces of carry-on luggage, which is the point of the TX, to be able to bring 7 passengers and 7 pieces of luggage to the airport so that you don't have to leave one of your kids at home, like in Home Alone 1 and 2. And back here, you can still have lots of space and fold down the seats if you need even more space, and you can do that just from some power switches off to the side. So overall, very good functional space and in a very stylish package. Okay, so over to the RX 350L, we don't have as much presence when it comes to the taillights being on and the Lexus emblem, but we still have some nice class here. I like the black and chrome look. I do like the chrome at the bottom. On this one, the exhausts are sort of integrated in so they don't sit out a whole lot. Interesting fact, on the regular RX, the rear wiper is tucked in underneath. But for whatever the reason, on the RXL, it is exposed just like in the TX. And let's look, oh, I slipped there. Let's look in the hatch. It's a little bit slower opening. I know that's me nitpicking, but it does open a little bit slower than any of the newer SUVs I find. And actually, back here, when you look at the floor space, it's not terrible. This doesn't open as high as the TX for sure. And when you look at the design of the cargo space, for instance, even just the shape of this right here, because of the silhouette of the RX, as the cargo gets higher, you get less and less space. So that's why you can't fit 5 or 6 pieces of carry-on here because you'd have to stack them all on the side. Anything taller than probably the seat, it's gonna get hit by the hatch. So that is just something to note that I think not a lot of people did. But when you look at just the floor space, it is actually pretty good. But that comes at a cost. So sitting in the back of the RX 350L, this is where there is a cost to that footprint in the trunk. And the cost is, it's tiny back here. To give you an idea, I'm 6'1", my head is touching right now the roof. My back of my butt all the way back on the seat and it's still touching. And then if I wanted to put the second row back in place, I actually can't. It won't lock in because of how tall I am. Now if I really squish, I can lock it in, but it is constantly applying pressure to my entire leg. So I would never want to be back here for a very long time. I'm not really a claustrophobic person, but I feel like I would be just because of the position that I'm put in when I sit here. So it'd be good for kids or just a really short trip if you like had to in a pinch get someone back here. Like legally, if you needed someone to have a seat, you could do it. And it's too bad because there is some amenities back here. So it is a 2-seater back here, which gives a little bit of space between you and the passenger beside you. But also, I have my own climate control back here. And I don't mean just vents. I mean, I have a little screen where I can change it from blowing on my feet, on my head. There's these little vents that I can control. There's no vents in the top, which is interesting, but there is some stuff back here. And I think Lexus really did have high hopes for this, and I had high hopes for it, but this third row is very limited in what you could use it for. And it actually gets worse. Okay, so where it gets more complicated is if you have to have someone that's also tall sit in that second row. And what I mean by that is if I had it sitting where I would need to have it, I'm gonna show you what that means for the back seat. And to show you one more, when I was sitting in the back seat, this seat here is how it would have to be for the next passenger in front of me. In fact, it kind of pushes everybody up closer to the front of the vehicle, almost including the driver. Other than that, the rest of the second row isn't too bad. There's not a lot of amenities, like you don't have climate control or any USB ports or anything like that, but it is comfortable. There's still soft materials on the doors and things like that, and some vents in the center. No curtains on this one. I think on the higher packages you get that, but overall just a very normal back seat or second row. Okay, so even getting into the third row of the TX was a better experience. You just press a button, the seat folds and moves, it's super easy. And the extra height helps for getting in and out of. But even sitting here, there's a couple things I forgot about or didn't realize until I put it next to the RX 350L. One of them is even how it's lit. And what I mean by that is the RX 350L just had a dome light in the center of the ceiling, but the TX has lights sort of all along the side, which kind of reminds me of an aircraft. I know I make that comparison a lot. But sitting back here, so I do have power folding seats, which I can recline back, and being a tall dude, now I have a little bit more space, but for this comparison, I'll just kind of put it to like a normal setting, which would be right here. And more importantly, when I slide this seat forward, that's how much room I have for the first click. And looking up, it's pretty close to the front, but you can see I have this much room to move and negotiate to get that second row in a comfortable position and this row in a comfortable position. Not to mention, back here I have things like USB-C ports, a place to put iPad, cup holders, and this massive window to look out of. Okay, so sitting in the second row of the TX, this will give you a good perspective on the size. So I have it where it's as far forward as I can without being uncomfortable in any way, which I mean, my legs aren't touching, my head isn't touching, that sort of thing. And just look to how much space is behind me. There's tons, to the point that I could negotiate a little bit with my buddy in the back seat and be like, hey, I want to get a little bit more room. Let me just slide back a little bit. Actually, this is as far back as that one goes. And I have lots of room in the front, there's lots of room in the back. It's magnificent. They did a great job. Not to mention, we have amenities like some beautiful cup holders that can be removed, 2 tablet holders in the center, and the console itself can be removed and taken out to clean and configurize and stuff like that. We have climate controls back here, heated and cooled seats for this row, as well as, you know, being able to change the temperature and where the air is blowing, etc. Some extra USB ports, USB-C ports, and just an overall really nice experience with some really nice materials, amenities, and space. There is absolutely no claustrophobia Dustin happening back here. So sitting in the 2021 RX 350L, the front seat is pretty much the same as any RX from that generation. And that was something a lot of people loved about the RX, was the cockpit design and all the things we have up here. Things like a cell phone holder that's padded, cup holders that go up and down, the Lexus touchpad, but if you wanted to, you could also just click the screen. So it was kind of like the transition period between the touchpad and the touchscreen, and now in the newest ones we're just in the touchscreen. We do still have buttons and knobs, which a lot of people do really like. This one has sort of like a faux wood grain. It is the premium package. The higher packages have the Shimomoku wood grain, which is a little bit nicer. Heated steering wheel, heated and cooled front seats, a gauge cluster that's analog with a digital readout in the center, and just an overall very nice front seat with some really nice sort of appointments. In the front of the TX, I'm not even gonna talk about all the new electronics, because I know in the comment section you're gonna say, well, it's the newer one, of course it's new electronics, and I get that. But let's just talk about like things like seating position. So it being a bigger vehicle, you do feel a little bit bigger up here. The hood looks bigger when you're sitting in it. The windshield looks taller. You have more headroom, that sort of thing. The seats probably feel a little bit bigger to me. The center console feels a little bit bigger, which means a little bit more comfort. Yes, there is more amenities like the armrest that opens butterfly-wise, the cup holders that you can remove, the little shifter that doesn't take up a lot of space and that made more space for other things. There's no more touchpad, so you don't have that Lexus touchpad. It's just a big touchscreen. But also we have things like this really nice suede on the dashboard, a little bit less sort of confusion and buttons and things like that. And a fully redesigned gauge cluster, which is all digital instead of the analog one. So lots of goodies here, which is expected because yes, comment section, it is the newer one for sure. So who is which vehicle for? It comes down to this. The RX 350L was great when it came out in terms of it checks some boxes. If you're someone that doesn't need that third row all the time, but doesn't mind having a place to put a couple extra passengers once in a while, the RX 350 will check that box. But also, a lot of my guests went with the RX 350L because of it just was a little bit heavier than the regular RX 350, and in turn, it was perceived to have a little bit smoother of a ride. But if you want a vehicle that has space, and I mean space for the second row, space for the third row, space for the trunk, and amenities for those seats and not just crammed in or not just an afterthought, the TX is the way to go. If you have adults that you're driving around for long road trips, the TX is the way to go. And have the latest tech and stuff like that. Obviously the TX would be a great upgrade from the RX 350L. In fact, I think this is more what Lexus was going for when they came out with the L, which served a purpose at the time. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Which one would you go for? Or if you're an owner of a RX 350L, would you upgrade to the new TX? Does it check the boxes for you? I'm Dustin Mason from Performance Lexus in St. Catharines. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.